Hello everyone, and in this video I'm going to cover Update 9 for Sons of the Forest. Now, this video doesn't have any spoilers. This update didn't add too much, but rather fixed a lot of issues with the game. There's a lot of fixes in it, and when I start off with one of the biggest fixes, they did a big pass on the base performance, so large bases will run much better. How much better? Well, my GPU usage dropped by about 30%. That is huge. I was so close to getting a 4090, but hopefully I don't have to now because the game is being optimized a lot better. If you haven't played in some time, I recommend you go and check it out. The game does run a lot better now. I'd say 30 to 40% better, but that's just based on my results. Probably has a lot to do with the settings you're using. But on to the next thing. They've added a radio alarm trap, and it uses the radios that you can find in camps and such. The rest of the resources it uses aren't that hard to find, but the radio itself, if you're not near a camp, building a few of these might be quite expensive. Now basically what it does is that when an enemy triggers the trap, it plays a very loud soundtrack. And it sounds like metal or heavy rock music, and they are prone to getting attacked. So if they do trigger them, you might want to go deal with it, otherwise they'll end up destroying it. I didn't check how strong these things are, but they look like they can take a beating. The only downside I see of this, that it only has one sound effect. So if you have multiple entrances to your base, you'll kind of just have to go based on your headphones or your speakers of where the sound is coming from, which I don't believe would be too much of an issue, but it would be nice if you could change the track so you could have multiple entrances with different sounds so you know where they are exactly as soon as they get triggered. It's a minor thing, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. This is exceptionally good if you're building next to a waterfall or running water, because running water drowns out a lot of sound from other things such as your walls getting attacked. So this is probably going to be like an essential trap that you're going to put at your entrance. The next change is that held radios can now be placed. I did mess around with it and it's not quite as good as I thought it would be. As you can see down the bottom of the screen, there is options like left click for next track, right click to turn on and off, and the middle mouse button to place. But when you place it, it doesn't place like a structure, meaning it can just get kicked around and such. But you can put it on furniture objects such as shelves and such, and hopefully it doesn't despawn. And you can still play music with it and stuff. The next change is that you can now blow up creepers into little pieces. Now this is a bit of a negative change, but for balancing and realism, it's kind of needed. If you blow them up, you won't be able to skin them and get creepy armor. So keep that in mind. And I also found out that if you hit them with traps too much, such as that spring-loaded trap, it can make them explode, but you won't get any creepy armor. So probably take it easy when you're attacking them. The next change is that they've added the creepy Virginia back into the game. This was an enemy from the forest originally, and N9 didn't have intentions of adding previous enemies, but they started with the babies on release, and then they added the Armsy, and now they've added the Virginia, which is perfectly fine. These enemies are great, very nostalgic, and they serve a purpose as well. Sons of the Forest didn't really have any behemoth type mutants, but they're starting to add them in. Ones that are huge. The twins and the fingers weren't exactly that big. Now the animations it uses are pretty much identical to the ones from the forest, which is completely fine. I got no issue with that at all. I don't know if it has any new animations. It does jump, whether that clears structures or not, because we'll have to wait and see. It does have boobies out, and I want to avoid demonetization as much as possible at the moment, because YouTube has got it out for me. I'm not going to show too much footage on this one. Its health was 320, and Armsy was 400, which is a lot more than twins and the fingers. The next change is that they've also added another female type enemy, and that is the fat female cannibal. If it's politically correct to say that, I don't really give a shit. But yes, she operates exactly as the fat male cannibal does. They even have the same health. I think it's 180. So they're hard-hitting ones, but slow, and they'll probably attack your walls. She has some different animations. She probably does have some different attacks. If you're into milk, I suggest you take a look at her. She's got some big assets, put it that way. But I can't show you because, as I mentioned before, YouTube's anti-women. The next change is that they've added controls for the panning of the inventory. Now what this means is that before, the panning of the inventory, moving around, and it was quite slow, but now you can adjust its speed. You can go a lot faster than you need to. I did testing with this with timescale before, and I found that about 75% faster was optimal. I think it starts on 35, 0.35. If you put it up to 0.65 or 70, maybe 75, it should be good. If you go max, it's just too disorientating. So not recommended doing that. Especially if you've got eye conditions where you'd require glasses or something, struggling focus, etc. But it's your choice, you get to pick what it can be. The next addition is they've added bastion placement, which was basically the same in the forest where you held down control with blueprints and you can place multiple ones. If you use the instant book build console command, type in cheat stick into your game, and then press F1, type it in, you can instantly place them from there too. This is a good change. The game's becoming more blueprint friendly. I found that when the game first came out, it didn't seem to like blueprints that much, but oh man, that's so good. Especially freeform ones. Oh, miss those good days, mate. So the default key is left shift or the left stick with the gamepad. It used to be left control, which was crouch, but yeah. A lot of the keys that were default in the forest aren't the same in this one. So switching backwards and forwards would be a pain. The next change is that loot pouches can now be opened even if the player is full. Items that the player is full on are now dropped when cleared from the map. This is an excellent change because it was so vague it didn't tell you what you were full on. Usually it would be something like medication, maybe you had too many wires or too many duct tapes. Never duct tapes because there's not enough duct tapes in this game. And it just drops in front of you. Don't forget to pick that stuff up, otherwise it will probably despawn. And usually be good stuff like duct tape. The next change is that night vision goggles and the rebreather can now be toggled if mapped to a hotkey. This is probably a good one because they're a pain to take on and off. And especially when you're in caves, you just go waist deep in water and it will activate the rebreather. This is a good one because the rebreather gets annoying in caves. You can kind of glitch it turning it on and off using the hotkey that you selected, but it's not as effective as you think it'd be. If you've got an NVIDIA video card and you're looking to brighten things up, then I recommend that you just use Shadow Play and Alt F3 and just add a filter. It's much easier that way, rather than doing these little exploits. Now, I don't know why I put this change here, but it was a pain to get working. You can now hold and take to equip skulls directly from pickup, which means that if there's a skull on a shelf and you're holding something, if you hold down E, you will pick it up. If you're holding nothing, it will automatically pick up into your hand anyway, because that's just what the default of the game is. The game doesn't like you having empty hands, which can kind of get annoying with the amount of animations there are in this game. Basically, what I'm saying is that if you're not holding something when you're building in that, it's actually faster because you're skipping an animation of putting your weapon away and then doing that task. Unfortunately, every time you pick up something accidentally, it puts it in your hand. It's annoying. There should be an option for that one, actually. They are a lot more better with their options in this game than they were in the forest, though, believe me. They added a jumping capability to the Armsy. Now, I tried testing this and I probably didn't really create the proper test environment. I probably should have built a fence or something, a stick fence, and reinforced it so you could jump over it. I'm not sure. But either way, I stood in front of a rock that I thought would be jumping height and he just got stuck on it, which made me think that this is probably a decent way to actually fight them. They have a lot of HP, so you're going to be there a long time with like a bow and arrow or something. But maybe it's a trick that's worth knowing. They were kind of like this in the forest, but probably not to this extent. Maybe the devs need to know this kind of thing. I was just trying to show off their new ability and end up finding an exploit. I caught him a couple of times doing it, I think. I'm not sure, but I was in a mad rush to do this video. I've only been back from my holiday for about 2 days now and I've got jet lag bad. So right now as I'm recording, it's 4 a.m. It's not fun. Now this is a change that I don't think was mentioned, but using cheat stick now opens up a huge menu on 4K. Usually the writing was really small. It seems really big now. I don't know if this is a bug or an actual feature. You can't scroll through the pages though, so you have to guess what's on the rest of it because this only goes up to L on 4K. I didn't check the other resolutions. I think for the devs, it might be in their own best interest to make their own cheat menu that's like similar to the mod API cheat menu. I mean, if I was developing a game, I probably would do something like that. Just so you don't have to type in everything. You can just flick switches on, click buttons, and then it'd just be faster to do testing and that sort of thing. But it's each to their own. It's not necessary, or I don't find it necessary because I'm so used to console commands at this point. They've made a change that enemies killed by player traps now count as killed by the player. Now, if you don't know what this means, is that there's hidden stats that you can activate within console commands. It was the same in the forest, but it's much cleaner in this one. It actually tells you how much you've killed. I believe this is what I'm looking at here. Now, this is my hard survival playthrough, and this is how many I've killed, but I don't know if it's backdated the kills I've done. So anything that's been killed, I don't know if it's been added to the pile. I'm not sure. Looking at these numbers, I've got no idea because sometimes the game feels like you're just constantly killing things. The console command for it is player kill stats on, and then you cycle through it pressing F2 or F3. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's F2. The next change is that they've added tutorial, vitals HUD, and global GUI visibility settings to the options page. What this means is that you can turn off your HUD pretty much, or just change it around, like turn the minimap off in the centerpiece, or you could just turn off all the vitality stuff, like all your stats and that, and just have the minimap, or just turn it all off. This is good for getting screenshots. I wish there was kind of a hotkey on the keyboard that you could press that switches off, so you can get better screenshots. You don't have to go back into the inventory, but it's good to have this option. Previously, the only other way to do this was to actually do it with console commands, and it was annoying too, because the change was permanent. You had to switch it on and off every time you got in and out of the game. I don't know why they did it like that, so it's good they added this change. The next one is that climbing ropes now stop at the surface of water rather than go to the bottom. Now, this might sound like a gimmicky change, but what it actually means is that you can use the climbing ropes to jump out of the water and into your base if you happen to be built on water. This is really cool. I really like this change. So you can grab onto the rope while in the water. I'm not sure if it has any side effect bonuses, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. The next change is that shooting dead bodies with rifle will now impart more force. Now, this isn't an important change. The only reason I've put it here is the word impart. I hadn't heard of this word before, so I decided to add it and find out what it actually means. It means to make information known or to bestow. For example, the teachers imparted a great deal of knowledge onto their pupils, or shiitake mushrooms impart a wonderfully woody flavor to the salad, according to Microsoft Bing. I know, I like that word. Haven't seen it used much in the English language, unless it's just not an Australian thing. The next change is a rather brilliant one, but traps will now cause damage to larger enemies and sometimes knock them down. The big cannibals were particularly annoying with this because they could just dodge traps, they walk over them, didn't trigger them. Mainly that spring-loaded trap, which is one of the best traps in the game because of how cheap it is. Because those mutants were quite troublesome a lot of the time because they would just bypass traps and go straight for your walls. A lot, I found. The next thing is that they fixed the delay between placing the first stone of a beam and the following ones. Now, this is a good change because this just added extra animation delay that was kind of unnecessary. However, it did serve a purpose in that you knew when you started a new placement. Because it's 4 rocks wide, you don't obviously know it instantly, so you're just going to have to pay a bit more attention to count. It is a good change, but it was a good indication of when you started a new beam. So yeah, stuff. The next one is that John 2 will now properly set off traps. John 2 was the worm variant, which is, because before, this mutant was just game breaking because he just used to end up in your base. He'd glitch through your walls, miss every trap, and it was just a nightmare. So I'm glad they're addressing this because this thing is just so annoying. I honestly felt it was worse than the worm. Still might have that opinion, we have to wait and see. The worm from the forest, I mean. Time will tell. Now I'm just going to list the rest of the changes or fixes that they made. There's a lot of fixes. And list off a couple of things that I think are important to mention that I didn't get footage for because either I couldn't or because I didn't have time, whatever reason a YouTuber will make. The first one is that the fly swatter and bowmaker traps will now do some damage to the player if they set them off. I wasn't able to set them off, and this is what gets onto the next one. Add an option to allow players to set if traps will trigger on players. This is off by default, but on in hard survival. Spring traps always trigger. I couldn't get them to trigger. I don't know if it's because I got an old save. I tried building new traps and it didn't work. So I don't know what this is all about. I'd imagine the damage wouldn't be very high, but yeah, it was kind of like the forest. The forest, you had to be careful with your own traps because they did hurt. Probably not as much as it hurts the enemies, but yeah. The next change is that ducks can now land on the ground and walk around in some areas, such as the golf course. I am very disappointed in myself for not getting this footage because I think it might be epic. See a little duckies waddling. Wonder how fast they run. They'll probably just fly away, actually. Such messy creatures. The next one is that free-formed place structures such as fire or fence posts placed on floors are now linked with the supporting floor. It will probably prevent dismantling the floor as well as propagate the collapse in the event the floor gets destroyed. So basically what this means, if you build those things on a floor and the floor gets destroyed, they get destroyed with it. I'm guessing they were floating before. I never tested it, but yeah, good realism change, I guess. Creepies will no longer be focused around cave entrances in late game after loading a save. They should now be distributed around a larger area. I haven't noticed this, but it probably makes sense that they spread them out. Otherwise, if you were building near a cave entrance, you're going to have a bad time. They've reduced the number of creepies wandering outside in late game. I don't know what they mean by late game. Maybe they should define that so players can know what that actually means, but I'm guessing it means after like day 30, as a guess. Day 30 is when the worms started spawning in the forest, which was the hardest enemy. Or day 21, I can't remember. They fixed the case where dead bodies would regrow limbs when the player returned to them. I thought this was funny. That's the only reason I'm mentioning it. I just found it entertaining. I haven't seen it, I don't think. Maybe it's not something you notice. Next is that defensive wall gates no longer allow partial collapse. This is good. Having dynamic structures such as that B-class was just a nightmare. I could imagine that it'd just be impossible to work with and it would glitch out too much. You can't have the gate itself just falling apart. This was a good change. I don't know why they make it harder on themselves doing it the other way. They fixed the glider and night V duplicating bugs. I've seen this before, but it's not very common. I'm okay with this as long as the original ones don't disappear. Like having your crap fall through the ground and then it's gone forever. I mean, there's a lot on the map, but having to go out and get it's kind of a pain. And the last one is that Calvin should now be able to find stones when the player is not around. He's quite good at getting stones until he runs out. Then he starts traveling pretty far to get them and it gets quite bad. But that is update 9. Quite impressive update I found, especially with the improvements to the performance. Not all of us can afford a 4090 or a 4080 for that matter. I would have got one, but I really didn't want it. It's so much money. So yeah, all they need to do at this point is add freeform blueprints and we're sweet. Game will be complete. Wishful thinking. Anyway, if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe. Cheers.